The marriage course is very practical. It's designed to equip you with the tools that we all need to create and maintain connection between us.
And while from time to time we'll quote from the Bible and occasionally talk personally about the difference our own Christian faith makes to us in our marriage, we're confident you'll find everything relevant to you and your relationship, whether or not you have a Christian faith or indeed any religious faith at all.
The course is based on the premise that marriage has the potential to be the closest, most intimate human relationship possible. The Bible uses the image of two people coming together and becoming one. Right at the start of the Bible, in the 2nd chapter, it says, "For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they'll become one flesh."
So, when we get married, our partner becomes our first loyalty. And we're joined together, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, and even spiritually. Some people might say, but what about a parent and child? Isn't that closer? After all, a child starts off life physically attached to his or her mother. But the task of parenting is to encourage increasing independence in children, both physically and emotionally. Marriage is the other way around. Marriage involves two people who at one time were complete strangers to each other. They meet, they fall in love, they get married, and embark on a relationship that's designed to be one of increasing intimacy and of a growing interdependence. But that's not automatic. We have to keep working at our marriage if we're to stay closely connected.
It is the very modern notion that love is just a feeling. And when that feeling goes, we can just walk away. But I know this, unless sometimes you fight to keep love alive, you will bounce from relationship to relationship, always searching for this perfect person that might be out there. I go to write my books in a little cottage overlooking Carmarthen Bay in West Wales. And a couple of years ago, I think it was an August day, it was a beautiful day, and I'm walking on the beach and the hills look lovely and the sand looks gorgeous and the sea looks as though somebody's taken 1,000,000 diamonds and scattered them along its surface. And as I made my way back up to the cottage, there's an old fisherman there. And I said, "It's idyllic, isn't it?" Perhaps he was just tired of tourists that day. He barked at me, "You should see it in winter." And honestly, when I walked on the beach the next day, it was equally lovely. But I felt the sea and the sand and the hills whisper to me, "Would you love us in winter?" Winter love comes to every relationship. And you know, it's remarkable. I so often meet couples who are about to split up and decide, we're going to try again. And I meet them 5, 10 years down the road, and they are more in love than they ever thought possible. And they look back and say, how could we have thought of even splitting? But to do that, they had to overcome this very modern idea that if you don't feel in love, just walk away.
Our daughter Kirsty and son-in-law Rick are involved in making sparkling wine on the south coast of England. And Nikki and I have learnt a lot from them about the work that goes into tending a vineyard in order to produce good wine. It's hard work. It requires care and attention of the vines on a regular cycle throughout the year, every year. And this is a good analogy for looking after our marriage. It takes work to look after a marriage and requires care and attention on a regular basis. We've taken 4 analogies from tending a vineyard. Now, while all 4 apply, whatever stage we're at in our relationship, it may be that one of the 4 is the most important for you right now, as a result of the particular season that you're in. The first analogy is adjusting. Newly planted vines have to adjust to the new soil, and this is a process that goes on for at least 3 years.
In a similar way, in the early years of a marriage, we have to learn to adjust to each other as we move from I to we, from being independent to being interdependent.
And this adjusting isn't always easy. So often when the initial infatuation has worn off, when we've taken off those rose-tinted glasses and we see each other in a new light, it's the very things that attracted us to each other that can become the things that annoy us about each other.
I'm Dimas Salaberios.
I'm Tiffany Salaberios.
We met at a church in Queens, New York.
New York City.
I was coming out of the church, she was coming in, and I grabbed the door, grabbed her hand, started to shake it, and I just had a loss for words.
One of the most attractive points of Dimas is he is so dynamic and charismatic and just like a magnet when he comes into the room. And so that's wonderful, right?
I love, I'm attracted to she's a strong woman. So that was one of the things that attracted me to her. She has a lot of opinions and she's a thinker, very passionate about things. So those were those things that were like, wow, I love her for this. This is amazing. This is the woman I want. But then there's some days you're like, whoa, the passion is intense. The opinions are really big. So I think that there are definitely those things that would attract a person. At times are those things that are sometimes much to handle in some moments.
As we discover how different we are, we can easily try, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously, to change our partner to be more like us. Now, over the years, I have to admit, I have tried to change Nicky in all sorts of areas, and in some, I'm still trying. For example, I am still trying to get him to allow more time to catch a train or a plane, and to get him to wear any other coloured sweater than blue, and also to try to stop him cleaning his shoes when we're about to leave the house to go somewhere. But I've discovered that trying to change Nicky to be more like me doesn't work. It's a universal principle of marriage. I can change myself, but I can't change my partner.
If we're to stay connected, this adjusting has to happen, not just at the beginning, but all the way through our marriage, because change is a fact of life. It's inevitable. Our circumstances change, we'll both change, and our relationship has to keep adjusting to accommodate these changes. Your conversations during the course will help you to recognize where you need to adjust in order to strengthen your connection and your marriage. The second analogy from tending a vineyard is pruning, and vines require a lot. Pruning is a very positive activity for the vine. It involves prioritizing the most important branches and cutting the other ones off in order to direct the vine's energy into the most fruitful branches. Otherwise, you get lots of leaves, but very little fruit. As life gets busier, maybe through having a child or work getting more demanding, a key skill in marriage is prioritizing, which involves pruning back certain areas of our lives in order to prioritize another.
And for couples who have children, so much time and energy can go into looking after them that the marriage can easily be neglected. And when that happens, it's the children who suffer most, because a child's security is deeply affected by their parents' marriage.
I remember one man on the marriage course saying, "I've just realized that the best way to love my children is by loving my wife." As life gets busier, we'll only survive as a couple if we learn to prioritize our marriage relationship over every other demand on our time.
I am married to someone who works a lot, and he likes his work a lot.
So I'm a lawyer, and it's time-intensive work. I think navigating that is an area of continued work for us. I was on a case, it was a crazy schedule. We were trying to meet a deadline by, and I remember quite clearly she reached out by phone to say, "Do you have time to talk to me?" And I said, "No, I don't." And then she tried to call, and I picked up just to answer and say, "No, I can't talk right now." And then I almost hung up the phone on her.
I really felt quite abandoned because you have planned on someone leaving, but you don't plan on them not having time to even take a phone call.
I really need to plan in advance and realize that just because I have responsibilities at work doesn't mean my responsibilities to my wife and to my family fade away into the background and are no longer there.
Anytime that we have gotten too much into thinking we're doing this as individuals and not as a team or as a unit, that's when we have felt pretty isolated.
The third analogy from tending a vineyard is supporting. In order for vines to flourish, they need to be supported. The investment in a good, well-kept trellis system of posts and wires is vital for the production of good fruit. Similarly, a marriage needs a support system if we're to work through challenges and to thrive over a lifetime. A marriage can't survive in isolation. This support network may include friends and family, or support may come from an older married couple whom we watch and learn from. But as well as having support from others, it's essential that we support each other.
We'll all face some big challenges along the way. Maybe a serious illness, maybe financial or job insecurity, perhaps facing infertility, or adjusting to the empty nest, or looking after an elderly parent, to name a few.
Personally, I found the change from parenting young children to parenting teenagers pretty challenging. Parenting teenagers didn't come so naturally to me as it did to Nicky, and I really needed his help, not to over-worry or over-control them, to listen to them and to give them space to grow in their independence. And Nicky's support made a massive difference during those years.
If we try to deal with our fears and challenges on our own, we lose connection with each other and can start to feel lonely within our marriage. Whereas, when we support each other, the very challenges we face can draw us closer together.
So I'm Pam, and this is Neil.
Yeah.
And we met
when we were 20.
We did, so that's 29 years ago. And we met in a little place in the east coast of Fife in Scotland. Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we've faced is we kind of both came into marriage and we thought we would have a family, and that has not happened for us. And as a woman, you're kind of, you know, there's this inbuilt thing about, you know, being a mum, having a baby. But I think the fundamental thing was about loss of that dream. We've had to walk through that together.
I had maybe expectations that I would maybe take on have one of my children to get married, and I would take my daughter down the aisle, or, you know, maybe a son's graduation or something.
Somebody gave a very helpful piece of advice to me when I was kind of pouring out my heart about this one day, and they said, you know, it's not just your arms, Pam, that are empty, it's Neil's arms as well. And again, just that focus off myself onto the other, I think was really helpful.
There was a whole piece where I had to really kind of go deep in myself to really support her, because I was about to kind of lose it at times as well. And so it really brought us together, closer together. And
my learning about Neil would be that he was there, and he was completely dependable and strong in that. Although he had his own moments of vulnerability, I think you were definitely strong when I needed you to be strong. I think we had to really keep our communication open with one another, because it would be very easy to get into not sharing and withholding or blaming. I think it definitely did make us stronger.
Yeah.